"Oh, what are we doing, Lucas?" she asked one night, her voice laced with a vulnerability that both touched and terrified me. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice a hoarse whisper. "But I can't seem to stop." "Neither can I," she confessed, her eyes searching mine for answers I didn't have. We were walking a tightrope, the chasm of social disapproval yawning beneath us, the whispers of gossip and judgment swirling around us like a gathering storm. Now a while before all this drama. The pasta was getting cold, the garlic bread growing stale. Not that I noticed at first. I was too busy watching Emma push her food around her plate, a furrow in her brow that deepened with every bite she didn't take. This wasn't like her. Emma, my Emma, usually devoured spaghetti carbonara with the enthusiasm of a starving artist. "Something on your mind?" I finally asked, setting my fork down, the clinking sound a jarring interruption to the tense silence that had settled over our usually cozy kitchen. She flinched, her gaze flitting up to meet mine, a flicker of something in her eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. Guilt, uncertainty, or maybe just plain old-fashioned dread. "Lucas," she began, her voice hesitant, a tremor in the usually confident tone that sent a shiver of unease down my spine. "We need to talk." The cliché, as overused as it was, still managed to punch the air out of my lungs. "Talk?" I echoed, my voice a hollow imitation of its usual self. "About what?" She took a deep breath, the air hitching in her throat like a sob about to escape. "About us," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "About space. I need space, Lucas. Space, the universal euphemism for I'm not happy, or I've met someone else, or maybe just I'm bored with you. The possibilities swirled in my mind, each one a sharp jab to my gut, a slow twist of the knife in my heart. "Space," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "What does that even mean?" She launched into a well-rehearsed speech, a litany of cliches about needing time to find herself, about feeling lost, about wanting to reignite the spark that had apparently fizzled out of our relationship. The words, as empty as they were familiar, bounced off me, their meaning lost in the growing chasm of disbelief that was opening up between us. 3 years. 3 years we'd built a life together. A life I thought was filled with love, laughter, and a shared vision for the future. Had I been wrong? Had I been living a lie, blind to the cracks in the foundation, the subtle shifts in her demeanor, the growing distance that I dismissed as stress, as fatigue, as anything but the truth that was now staring me in the face? No, this wasn't about me. This was about Emma, about her doubts, her insecurities, her inability to appreciate the love, the loyalty, the unwavering support I had offered her. The anger began to simmer beneath the hurt, a righteous indignation at being taken for granted, at being treated like a backup plan, a safety net for her own emotional indecision. "So that's it then?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, the calm before the storm brewing within me. She nodded, her eyes downcast, avoiding my gaze. I think so," she whispered, the words barely audible. I studied her for a moment, searching for a flicker of remorse, a hint of the woman I thought I knew. But all I saw was a stranger, her face etched with a fear that wasn't about losing me, but about losing herself. And in that moment, I knew that this wasn't just about space. This was about something far more profound, something that had been brewing beneath the surface for longer than I cared to admit. And I, the ever-loyal Lucas, the man who had always put her needs first, was about to make a decision that would change everything. Space. She wanted space. Fine. If that's what she needed to find herself, to reignite the spark, then who was I to deny her the cosmic quest for self-discovery? So I threw myself into work. Those spreadsheets and deadlines suddenly a welcome distraction from the gaping hole where my heart used to be. I even started going to the gym again. Those grunts and clanging weights, a surprisingly effective way to channel the frustration that threatened to bubble over every time I pictured Emma finding herself in some trendy coffee shop, probably journaling about her journey in a moleskin notebook. And then there were the calls, or rather, the lack thereof. The once frequent "just thinking of you" texts dwindled to sporadic "I'm busy" messages. Her voice on the rare phone calls a strained echo of its usual warmth. Her excuses were as flimsy as a politician's promises: a work emergency, a family crisis, a sudden onset of existential angst that apparently required her to spend an entire weekend holed up in her apartment, phone switched off, presumably contemplating the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. The confirmation came in the form of a carelessly geotagged Instagram post. Emma, beaming, perched on the edge of a ridiculously oversized bathtub overflowing with rose petals. A caption that read, "Home sweet home # new beginnings # blessed." The location tag, Ryan's penthouse apartment. The same Ryan she'd sworn was just a friend. The same Ryan she'd claimed to have no feelings for. The same Ryan she was now apparently sharing a ridiculously oversized bathtub with. The image seared itself onto my brain, a branding iron of betrayal searing its mark onto my soul. The initial shock gave way to a wave of nausea, a visceral reaction to the sheer audacity of her deception. All those whispered phone calls, the missed dates, the vague excuses about needing space. It all clicked into place, the pieces of the puzzle forming a picture so clear, so undeniable that I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it before. She hadn't wanted space. She'd wanted a trial separation, a test drive of her old flame, a safety net in case her grand reunion with Ryan didn't pan out. And I, the ever-loyal Lucas, the man who had built his world around her, had been nothing more than a convenient backup plan, a fallback option in case her romantic gamble didn't pay off. The anger was a living thing, a roaring inferno that threatened to consume me. I paced my apartment, my phone clutched in my hand, the urge to call her, to scream, to unleash the torrent of fury that raged within me, almost overwhelming. But then, a different voice, a calmer, more rational voice, cut through the noise. "What's the point, Lucas?" it whispered. "What will screaming achieve? Will it change anything? Will it make her love you? Will it erase the betrayal? No, it wouldn't." So I took a deep breath, the anger slowly receding, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a meltdown. I wouldn't play the role of the heartbroken ex begging for answers, pleading for a second chance. I deserved better than that. I called her, my voice surprisingly steady, the calm before the storm a deliberate tactic. "Emma," I said, "we need to talk." Her voice when she answered was a chirpy imitation of its usual self, a performance so unconvincing that it only fueled my anger. "Oh, hey, Lucas, what's up?" "I saw your post," I said, cutting to the chase. "The one with the bathtub and the rose petals? The one at Ryan's apartment?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening, a testament to her guilt, her inability to deny the undeniable. "Oh," she finally mumbled, her voice small and hesitant. "That. Well, you see." "I see that you lied to me," I interrupted, my voice hardening. "I see that you've been playing me for a fool. I see that you never intended to come back." "Lucas, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking with a desperation that was as pathetic as it was predictable. "It's not like that. I was confused. I needed time to figure things out." "Figure things out?" I scoffed, my anger resurfacing. "You figured out that you'd rather be with your ex than with me. You figured out that I was a convenient backup plan, a safety net in case your little reunion didn't work out." "That's not fair," she protested, her voice rising with indignation. "Fair?" I echoed, my voice laced with a bitter irony. "You want to talk about fair, Emma? You're the one who lied, who manipulated, who treated me like an option, a second choice. And you want to talk about fair?" "Lucas, please." "No, Emma," I interrupted, my voice cold and final. "I'm done. Done with the lies, the games, the emotional roller coaster you've put me through. I deserve better than to be someone's fallback option. I deserve someone who chooses me, who loves me, who values me for who I am, not for what I can offer them. I hung up the phone, the dial tone a symphony of finality. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it all coalesced into a single, unwavering resolve. I was moving on, and Emma, with her ex and her lies and her carefully constructed illusions, could stay right where she was, in the past. I was done being the backup plan. I was done being the second choice. I was done being anything less than what I deserved. The first step was the hardest: blocking her number, deleting her from social media, erasing the digital traces of a love that had turned to ashes. My finger hovered over the block button, a tremor of doubt momentarily shaking my resolve. Was this the right thing to do? Was I being too harsh, too unforgiving? Then I pictured her in that ridiculous bathtub, Ryan's smug grin reflected in the rose petal-infused water, and the doubt vanished, replaced by a steely determination. No, I wasn't being harsh. I was protecting myself from the emotional quicksand she had dragged me into, the toxic cycle of hope and disappointment, the insidious erosion of my self-worth. The calls came, of course. A barrage of missed calls, frantic voicemails, desperate texts that pinged with an insistent rhythm against the wall of silence I had erected. I ignored them all, the satisfaction of each unanswered call, a small victory in the war against my own weakness, my own lingering attachment to a woman who had proven herself unworthy of my love. "Dude, are you sure about this?" Chris, my oldest friend, his voice laced with concern, questioned my strategy over a beer one Friday night. "Isn't ghosting a bit extreme?" I took a swig of my beer, the bitterness a fitting accompaniment to the conversation. Extreme? She's the one who moved in with her ex 2 weeks after asking for space to find herself. I'd say that's pretty extreme. Chris chuckled, his eyes twinkling with a mix of amusement and understanding. Fair point. But you guys were good together. Are you sure you're not throwing away something special? Special? I scoffed, the word laced with a bitterness that surprised even myself. Special is being someone's first choice, not their fallback option. Special is being loved for who you are, not for what you can offer. Special is not being lied to and manipulated. Chris nodded, his expression sobering. You're right, man. She messed up, big time. But are you sure you're not hurting yourself more by cutting her off completely? Maybe, I admitted, the honesty a surprising relief. But I need this. I need to clear my head, to heal, to rediscover who I am outside of that mess. The pain was still there, of course, a dull ache that throbbed with a persistent rhythm. But with each passing day, with each unanswered call, with each step I took towards a life that was truly my own, the ache lessened, the wound slowly beginning to heal. The ballroom buzzed with the forced gaiety of Alexandria's elite, a symphony of clinking champagne glasses and strained laughter echoing off the gilded walls. I surveyed the scene with a detached amusement, my years of attending these obligatory social functions having honed my ability to blend in while remaining utterly disengaged. Tonight, however, was different. Tonight, I wasn't just going through the motions. Tonight, I was free. Free from the weight of a relationship that had turned toxic, free from the expectations of a woman who had never truly appreciated me, free to simply be. And in that newfound freedom, a spark of genuine curiosity ignited, a desire to engage, to connect, to explore the possibilities that this new chapter of my life held. Lucas Carter, as I live and breathe. A voice cut through the polite chatter, its tone a refreshing blend of amusement and genuine warmth. I turned to find Isabella, Ryan's sister, her emerald eyes sparkling with a mischievous glint that belied the cool elegance of her demeanor. I'd always admired her from afar, her sharp wit, her independent spirit, her refusal to conform to the expectations of our social circle. But our interactions had always been limited to polite greetings and awkward small talk at family gatherings. Isabella? I acknowledged, a genuine smile spreading across my face. Fancy meeting you here. Fancy indeed, she retorted, her lips curving into a playful smirk. though I suspect your presence here has less to do with philanthropy and more to do with escaping the clutches of a certain ex-girlfriend. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her bluntness. You could say that, I admitted, a wry chuckle escaping my lips. Good, she said, her voice firm. She doesn't deserve you, Lucas. Never did. The honesty, so refreshing in this world of veiled insults and carefully constructed facades, caught me off guard. You always were the perceptive one, I remarked, a genuine admiration coloring my tone. Someone has to keep the Carter clan in check, she quipped, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Besides, I've always had a soft spot for the underdog. We fell into conversation then, the polite chatter quickly evolving into a deeper exchange about Emma's manipulative tendencies, the fallout from her betrayal, and the ripple effects it had created within our intertwined social circles. Isabella's insights were sharp, her wit as dry as a good martini, her perspective refreshingly honest and devoid of the usual social niceties. She always did have a talent for playing the victim, Isabella observed, her voice laced with a sardonic amusement that mirrored my own. Even when she was the one holding the knife. And Ryan? I asked, curious about her perspective on her brother's role in this tangled drama. Ryan, she sighed, a hint of weariness in her voice, is a man perpetually seeking validation in all the wrong places. Emma's tears are his oxygen, her drama his lifeblood. I listened, captivated by her intelligence, her wit, her ability to dissect the complexities of human behavior with a surgeon's precision. And as the conversation flowed, I felt a spark ignite within me, a connection that transcended the shared animosity towards Emma, a hint of something deeper, something more profound than I had anticipated. And as I raised my glass in a silent toast to Isabella, her laughter echoing through the ballroom, I knew that this was just the beginning. The coffee shop, tucked away on a quiet side street, was a world away from the pretentious galas and stuffy charity events that usually defined our social calendar. Isabella, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, a smudge of paint on her cheek, looked more like a rebellious art student than a scion of the Carter dynasty. And I, freed from the constraints of my previous life, found myself drawn to her unconventional charm, her effortless elegance, her refreshingly unfiltered perspective on the world. This is so much better than lukewarm champagne and forced smiles, she declared, taking a sip of her latte, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Couldn't agree more, I replied, savoring the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the easy banter that flowed between us. Our conversations ranged from the mundane to the profound, from the latest art exhibit to the complexities of human relationships, from the absurdity of social expectations to the quiet joys of a simple life. We debated, we challenged, we laughed, our words a symphony of shared values, compatible personalities, and a growing sense of connection that surprised and delighted me. You know, Isabella remarked one evening as we shared a plate of tapas at a cozy Spanish restaurant, I always thought you were, well, a bit boring. I chuckled, unfazed by her bluntness. Boring? That's a new one. Usually I get reliable, dependable, predictable. All synonyms for boring, she quipped, her eyes twinkling with mischief. But I was wrong. You're actually quite interesting. Interesting, I echoed, raising an eyebrow. And what, pray tell, has changed your mind? This, she said, gesturing between us with a forkful of patatas bravas. These conversations, these shared moments, this ease. I've never felt this comfortable with anyone, not even my own family. The honesty in her voice, the vulnerability in her eyes, touched a chord within me, a resonance that echoed the growing affection I felt for this woman who was so different from anyone I had ever known. And as I looked at her laughter echoing through the cozy restaurant, I realized that she was right. This was easy, effortless, a connection that flowed naturally without the pretense, the games, the constant need for validation that had characterized my relationship with Emma. The comparison was inevitable, a shadow lurking at the edges of my newfound happiness. Emma, with her demands, her insecurities, her insatiable hunger for attention. She had always been a whirlwind, a force of nature that had both exhilarated and exhausted me. Isabella, on the other hand, was a steady flame, a source of warmth and light that illuminated the path without consuming everything in its path. With Emma, I had always felt a need to prove myself, to earn her affection, to meet her ever-shifting expectations. With Isabella, I could simply be myself, my flaws and insecurities accepted, my strengths appreciated, my presence valued for its own sake. The line blurred gradually, like a watercolor painting left in the rain. What had started as easy companionship, a shared refuge from the wreckage of our respective romantic misadventures, was slowly morphing into something more. A lingering touch of hands reaching for the same appetizer, a shared glance across a crowded room that spoke volumes, a laughter that intertwined and lingered in the air long after the punchline had faded. We were playing with fire, I knew that. Isabella, with her fiery spirit and her disdain for convention, was a dangerous combination, especially given the tangled web of relationships that connected us. But the pull was undeniable, a gravitational force that defied logic, a spark that threatened to ignite a conflagration that could burn us both. "You know," she said one evening, her voice low and husky, her eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight that danced between us, "this is probably a terrible idea." "Probably," I agreed, my voice a mirror to her own, the unspoken question hanging heavy in the air. "But," she continued, her gaze meeting mine with a challenge that both terrified and exhilarated me, "terrible ideas are often the most fun." And fun it was. The stolen glances, the playful banter that bordered on flirtation, the shared jokes that only we understood. It was a heady cocktail, intoxicating and addictive, a dangerous game that we both knew could have explosive consequences. "You're distracting me, Carter," she'd murmur, her fingers brushing against mine as we reached for the wine bottle, a spark of electricity that sent shivers down my spine. "Blame the company, not the distraction," I'd retort, my voice a husky whisper, my eyes locked with hers, the unspoken desire burning between us. The realization that we were falling for each other, that this wasn't just a friendship, a convenient alliance against a common enemy, was both exhilarating and terrifying. Exhilarating because Isabella, with her fiery spirit and her unwavering loyalty, was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Terrifying because the potential fallout, the family drama, the inevitable clash of loyalties could shatter the fragile peace we had both found. "What are we doing, Lucas?" she asked one night, her voice laced with a vulnerability that both touched and terrified me. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice a hoarse whisper, "but I can't seem to stop." "Neither can I," she confessed, her eyes searching mine for answers I didn't have. We were walking a tightrope, the chasm of social disapproval yawning beneath us, the whispers of gossip and judgment swirling around us like a gathering storm. But in that moment, as I looked at her, her face illuminated by the moonlight, her hand reaching for mine, I knew that I wouldn't turn back. The risk was real, the potential for heartbreak undeniable, but the alternative, a life lived in fear, a love denied, a connection stifled by the expectations of others, was a price I was no longer willing to pay. And as I leaned in, my lips brushing against hers, the spark igniting into a flame that threatened to consume us both, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications, charged with a tension that crackled between us like a live wire. "We can't," Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves of the ancient oak tree that sheltered us from the prying eyes of the world. "I know," I replied, my voice a mirror to her own, the echo of our shared denial a testament to the absurdity of our situation. Ryan, Emma, the tangled web of relationships, the inevitable fallout, the potential for a family feud that could make the Montagues and Capulets look like a playground squabble. It was a minefield we were tiptoeing around, the explosion inevitable, the damage unpredictable. But the heart, that stubborn, irrational organ, refused to listen to the dictates of logic. It beat a rhythm of its own, a primal drumbeat that echoed the undeniable truth. We were in love, a love born from the ashes of betrayal, a love forged in the fires of shared pain and unexpected connection, a love that defied the boundaries of convention, the expectations of society, the very fabric of our intertwined family histories. "So what do we do?" Isabella asked, her voice gaining strength, a flicker of defiance in her emerald eyes that mirrored the rebellion stirring within my own soul. "We choose," I said, the word hanging in the air, a challenge, a declaration, a commitment. "We choose us." The silence that followed was filled with unspoken promises, a shared understanding that transcended the fear, the doubt, the potential consequences of our decision. We were not pawns in a game orchestrated by others, not victims of circumstance, not prisoners of a past we couldn't change. We were adults, capable of making our own choices, of forging our own path, of claiming a happiness that was ours to take. "I love you, Lucas," Isabella said, the words a whisper, a confession, a declaration of war against the forces that sought to keep us apart. "I love you too, Isabella," I replied, my voice firm, my heart swelling with a conviction that eclipsed any fear, any doubt, any lingering loyalty to a past that no longer held any power over me. We kissed then, beneath the ancient oak, our lips a meeting place of defiance and desire, our bodies a testament to the undeniable connection that bound us together. The charity auction was a predictable affair, a parade of designer gowns, inflated egos, and thinly veiled one-upmanship disguised as philanthropy. Emma, clinging to Ryan's arm like a life raft in a sea of social anxiety, plastered a smile on her face, her eyes scanning the room with a practiced air of indifference. Then she saw them. Lucas, laughing, his hand resting lightly on Isabella's back, his gaze locked with hers, a warmth in his eyes that she hadn't seen in months, maybe years. Isabella, usually a picture of cool detachment, was radiant, her smile genuine, her body language radiating a confidence that Emma had never possessed. The sight was like a punch to the gut, a visceral reminder of what she had lost. Jealousy, a green-eyed monster she hadn't known she harbored, coiled in her stomach, its claws digging into her carefully constructed composure. How could he? How could Lucas, her Lucas, the man who had worshipped the ground she walked on, be so happy, so at ease with someone like Isabella? "Well, well, well," Ryan drawled, his voice laced with a sardonic amusement that grated on Emma's nerves. "Look who it is. Lover boy's moved on, and with my sister, no less. Talk about keeping it in the family." Emma forced a laugh, the sound brittle and unconvincing. "How cozy," she managed, her voice a strained imitation of its usual lightness. Lucas, sensing their presence, turned, his smile widening as he acknowledged them. "Emma Ryan," he said, his voice a calm contrast to the turmoil raging within her. "Fancy meeting you here." "Fancy indeed," Isabella chimed in, her eyes twinkling with a mischievous glint that Emma recognized as a challenge. "Seems fate has a sense of humor, doesn't it?" Emma's carefully crafted facade threatened to crumble. She had expected Lucas to be heartbroken, pining for her, perhaps even making a pathetic attempt to win her back. Instead, he was thriving, his happiness a slap in the face, a silent rebuke to her own misguided choices. "You seem happy," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "I am," Lucas replied simply, his gaze unwavering, his hand tightening on Isabella's. The unspoken message was clear. He had moved on, and he had moved on to someone better. Ryan, sensing Emma's discomfort, couldn't resist a parting shot. "Don't worry, Emma," he sneered, his voice laced with a thinly veiled jealousy. "I'm sure he'll come crawling back eventually. They always do." But Lucas didn't rise to the bait. He merely smiled, a genuine smile that radiated a confidence Emma had never seen before, and turned back to Isabella, his attention focused on the woman who had captured his heart, the woman who had shown him the true meaning of love and loyalty. As Emma watched them walk away, their laughter echoing through the crowded ballroom, a wave of regret washed over her. A bitter realization that she had lost the best man she ever knew. The life she had envisioned, the happiness she had craved, the love she had so carelessly discarded. It was all slipping through her fingers, replaced by a gnawing emptiness, a chilling premonition of a future filled with regret and loneliness. Emma, never one to accept defeat gracefully, launched a campaign of subtle manipulations and not-so-subtle attempts to recapture Lucas's attention. She'd accidentally bump into him at his favorite coffee shop, her apologies laced with a carefully calculated blend of vulnerability and regret. She'd send him thoughtful texts, reminiscing about their special moments and inside jokes, her words a thinly veiled attempt to rekindle the flame she had so carelessly extinguished. "Remember that time we went to that awful karaoke bar and you sang Bohemian Rhapsody with a fake British accent?" She'd text, her message accompanied by a laughing emoji that felt as fake as her sentiment. "Vaguely," I'd reply, my response deliberately brief, my disinterest palpable. Undeterred, she'd escalate her efforts, her tactics growing bolder, her desperation more evident with each passing encounter. At a charity gala, she'd corner me by the buffet table, her eyes shimmering with a manufactured sadness that would have been Oscar-worthy if it weren't so transparent. "Lucas," she'd begin, her voice a tremulous whisper, "can we talk, just for a minute?" "I think we've said all there is to say, Emma," I'd reply, my gaze fixed on the miniature quiches, my disinterest a shield against her manipulative charm. "But I miss you," she'd confess, her voice cracking with a manufactured emotion that felt as hollow as her promises. "I miss our conversations, our laughter, our—" "Our what, Emma?" I'd interrupt, my voice hardening, the patience I'd once possessed for her games now worn thin. "Our shared history of lies and betrayals? Our carefully constructed illusion of a relationship that was never truly real?" Her carefully crafted facade would falter, the mask of vulnerability slipping to reveal the frustrations simmering beneath the surface. "You've changed," she'd accuse, her voice laced with a petulant whine. "You're not the Lucas I knew." "No, Emma," I'd agree, a hint of amusement coloring my tone. "I'm not. I've grown. I've learned. I've realized that I deserve better than to be someone's second choice, someone's fallback option." Her eyes would narrow, the anger flashing in their depths a testament to her wounded pride, her inability to accept that her usual tactics were no longer effective. She had always been the one in control, the puppet master pulling the strings, manipulating those around her to dance to her tune. But now, the strings were cut, the puppet show over, and she was the one left dangling, her powerlessness a bitter taste of the medicine she herself had dispensed. The more she tried to regain my attention, the more I retreated, my focus firmly fixed on Isabella, the woman who had shown me the true meaning of love, loyalty, and mutual respect. Emma's games, once a source of frustration and confusion, now held no power over me. I had moved on, and her desperate attempts to draw me back into her web of manipulation only served to solidify my resolve, my indifference a testament to my newfound emotional maturity and self-respect. Ryan, never one to miss an opportunity for a power play, saw my burgeoning relationship with Isabella as a threat to his carefully constructed kingdom of control. He'd corner me at family gatherings, his smile as sharp as a shard of glass, his words dripping with a thinly veiled animosity. "So, Carter," he'd sneer, his eyes glinting with a malicious amusement. "Playing happy families with my little sister, are we? Hope you're not getting any ideas above your station." "My intentions are perfectly honorable, Ryan," I'd reply, my voice laced with an amused indifference that only seemed to fuel his ire. "Unlike some people I could mention." He'd bristle at the thinly veiled jab, his face reddening with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. But he wouldn't back down, his need to assert his dominance, to reestablish his control over the situation, overriding any sense of decorum. His tactics were as predictable as they were pathetic. He'd drop subtle hints about my past with Emma, insinuating that I was still hung up on his girlfriend, that my interest in Isabella was nothing more than a rebound, a desperate attempt to get back at his ex. "Just be careful, little sis," he'd warn Isabella, his voice dripping with a faux concern that was as transparent as his motives. "Carter's got a history of broken hearts. Wouldn't want you to become another casualty of his emotional baggage." But Isabella, bless her sharp wit and unwavering loyalty, wasn't buying it. "Don't worry about me, brother dear," she'd retort, her eyes flashing with a defiance that mirrored my own. "I can handle myself. And besides, I think Lucas is finally with someone who appreciates him for who he is, not for who he used to be." The sting of her words, the implicit comparison to his own shallow and manipulative relationship with Emma, would hit Ryan where it hurt most: his ego. He'd fume and sputter, his attempts to undermine our happiness only serving to strengthen our bond, our shared laughter a testament to the unshakable trust we had built. Ryan's interference, however, was more than just a nuisance. It was a reflection of his own deep-seated insecurities, his fear of losing control, not just over Emma, but over his own sister and the carefully curated image he had constructed for himself. He saw our relationship as a threat to his dominance, a challenge to his authority, a disruption to the status quo he had so carefully maintained. The whispers followed us like shadows, slithering through the corridors of our social circles, their venomous hiss a constant reminder of the tangled web we were caught in. Emma, her pride wounded, her control slipping, resorted to veiled insults and thinly veiled threats, her attempts to undermine our happiness only serving to fuel our defiance. Ryan, his insecurity masked by a veneer of arrogance, continued his campaign of sabotage, his snide remarks and manipulative insinuations bouncing off the shield of our unwavering bond. "They can't hurt us, Isabella," I said one evening as we strolled hand in hand through the moonlit gardens of her family estate, the whispers of gossip fading into the gentle rustling of the leaves. "I know," she replied, her voice a soft echo in the stillness of the night, her fingers tightening around mine. "Their words are just that. Words. They have no power over us, not unless we give it to them. And we won't," I affirmed, my voice filled with a conviction that resonated with the strength of our love. "We won't let them dim our light, extinguish our spark, or poison our happiness." "I never thought I'd find this," Isabella confessed one night, her head resting on my chest, the steady beat of my heart a comforting rhythm against her ear. "This peace, this happiness, this sense of belonging. Neither did I admitted, my voice a husky whisper against her hair. "But I'm grateful. Grateful for the journey, for the lessons learned, for the pain that led me to you." The journey had been long, the road winding and treacherous, but the destination, I realized, was worth every step of the way. I had stumbled, I had fallen, I had been betrayed and broken. But I had also risen, stronger, wiser, more resilient. And in the arms of this extraordinary woman, I had found a love that was more than just a romantic ideal, more than just a fleeting passion. I had found a partnership, a sanctuary, a home. The knock on my door was hesitant, a timid rapping that echoed the uncertainty in the voice that followed. "Lucas, it's Emma. Can we talk?" I opened the door, my expression carefully neutral, the surprise I felt masked by a practiced indifference. Weeks had passed since our last confrontation, weeks filled with the quiet joy of building a life with Isabella, a life free from the drama and manipulation that had defined my relationship with Emma. Seeing her now, her eyes red-rimmed, her face pale and drawn, a flicker of sympathy, unwelcome and unsettling, stirred within me. "Emma?" I acknowledged, stepping aside to let her in. "What brings you here?" She stepped into my apartment, her gaze darting around the space, taking in the minimalist decor, the absence of clutter, the subtle signs of a life that was no longer hers. I need to talk to you," she stammered, her voice trembling with a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. About what? I asked, my tone deliberately cool, my arms crossed defensively. About us, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. About everything. I made a mistake, Lucas. A huge mistake. The confession, raw and unfiltered, hung in the air, a stark contrast to the carefully constructed facade she usually presented. A mistake? I echoed, my voice laced with a hint of skepticism. That's putting it mildly, Emma. I know, she whispered, her shoulders slumping with defeat. I was foolish, selfish, blind. I threw away the best thing I ever had for what? For a man who doesn't love me, a relationship that's already falling apart, a life that's a pale imitation of the one we had. She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with a desperate longing that tugged at the edges of my resolve. I miss you, Lucas, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. I miss your kindness, your stability, your everything. I was an idiot. Can you ever forgive me? The apology, though long overdue, was undeniably sincere. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, a flicker of the old affection that had once bound us together. But the hurt, the betrayal, the deep-seated resentment, it was still there, a barrier between us, a reminder of the damage she had caused. I don't know, Emma, I said honestly, my voice softening slightly. I'm not sure I can. But I love you, Lucas, she pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. I never stopped loving you. I got lost. I made a mistake. Please give me another chance. I'll do anything to have you back. Emma's confession hung in the air, a fragile plea for a second chance that tempted the darker corners of my heart. For a fleeting moment, the urge to indulge in a petty revenge, to rub salt in her wounds, to make her feel the pain she had inflicted on me was almost overwhelming. But then I looked at her face etched with genuine remorse, her eyes filled with a desperation I hadn't seen before, and the urge subsided, replaced by a weary understanding. Emma, I began, my voice gentle but firm. I appreciate your honesty, I truly do. But what's done is done. We can't go back. But we can move forward, she pleaded, her voice cracking with a renewed hope that both touched and frustrated me. We can start over. We can be better, stronger, wiser. Please, Lucas, give us another chance. I shook my head, the temptation to give in, to succumb to the familiar comfort of her presence, battling with the hard-won knowledge of my own worth. I can't, Emma, I said, my voice laced with a regret that was as much for myself as for her. You broke my trust. You shattered my heart, and I can't risk going through that again. But I've changed, she insisted, her voice rising with a desperate urgency. I've realized my mistakes. I know what I threw away. Please, Lucas, don't let this be the end. It already is the end, Emma, I said, my voice softening with a sadness that mirrored the fading hope in her eyes. You made your choice. You chose Ryan. You chose the drama. You chose a life that was more about appearances than about genuine connection. And I chose myself. I chose happiness. I chose Isabella. The mention of Isabella's name hung in the air, a finality that shattered any remaining illusions Emma might have harbored. She flinched, her face crumpling with a fresh wave of despair. Isabella? She echoed, her voice barely a whisper. But she's everything you're not, I finished, my voice hardening with a touch of the anger that still simmered beneath the surface. She's kind, she's loyal, she's honest. And she loves me, Emma. Not for what I can offer her, not for the life I can provide, but for who I am, flaws and all. Emma's last vestiges of hope faded, replaced by a bitter realization of the magnitude of her loss. She had gambled everything on a fleeting infatuation, a misguided pursuit of passion that had left her with nothing but ashes. And in her desperation to reclaim what she had thrown away, she had only succeeded in pushing Lucas further away, solidifying his bond with the woman she had once dismissed as insignificant. I understand, she whispered, her voice choked with a regret that was as profound as it was futile. Good, I said, my tone gentle but firm. Then let's leave it at that. I watched as she turned and walked away, her shoulders slumped with defeat, her footsteps heavy with the weight of her mistakes. A part of me, the part that had once loved her, ached for her. But another part, the part that had finally learned to prioritize his own happiness, his own self-worth, felt a sense of closure, a quiet satisfaction at having finally closed the door on a chapter of his life that had been filled with more pain than joy. The grand opening of the Carter Foundation's new art center was the social event of the season, a glittering spectacle of wealth, influence, and carefully curated public personas. Emma, clinging to Ryan's arm with a desperation that belied her strained smile, felt the weight of 1,000 eyes judging her, assessing her, whispering behind their manicured hands. Then they entered the room. Lucas and Isabella. A vision of effortless elegance and undeniable connection. He in a tailored suit that accentuated his broad shoulders and confident stance, a quiet strength radiating from his every move. She in a flowing gown that shimmered with every step, her head held high, her eyes sparkling with a joy that Emma hadn't seen in years. They moved through the crowd like a force of nature, their laughter echoing through the hushed hall, their hands clasped together, their bodies a symphony of unspoken intimacy. Emma watched them, her heart twisting with a bitter blend of jealousy and regret, her carefully constructed facade cracking under the weight of their undeniable happiness. Ryan, his ego bruised by his sister's defiance and his own inability to control the situation, seethed with resentment. He muttered snide remarks under his breath, his attempts to belittle me and Isabella falling flat against the impenetrable shield of our love. Emma, watching us from the sidelines, felt the last vestiges of hope crumble within her. She had made her choice, and now she was paying the price. The life she had envisioned, the happiness she had craved, the love she had so carelessly discarded. It was all gone, replaced by a gnawing emptiness, a chilling premonition of a future filled with regret and loneliness. She was adrift, alone, a castaway in a world that no longer welcomed her. The whispers followed her. The judgments echoed in her ears, the consequences of her actions a heavy burden she now had to bear. She had played the game of love and lost, her manipulations backfiring, her strategies failing, her carefully constructed facade shattered against the rock of my newfound happiness.